Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. This is Down Tempo Life with James. This is a podcast about helping you find a rhythm of a slow, clear, purposeful mindset. I'd like to help you live from a place of what I like to call calm sensibility. I think that the purpose of the content that I'm creating, it's intended to speak to the connectiveness that we need to find within ourselves. The world around us induces anxiety. We can't control everything that goes on externally, but internally we have a dialogue, and there's an atmosphere that we can create within ourselves. But so much of that comes from how we think and how we perceive things and how we receive and process information. From a healthy internal life, a healthy mindset, a vibrant voice from inside that's positive, that's not taken by emotion, that's not driven by passion, we can tap into perspective and connect to purpose, to meaning, to direction. In the face of anxiety, in the face of all things, we can't find our way. A lot of what I just said begins with the balance of having a healthy ego. Now, the word ego is a contentious word if it's not understood. It has a negative connotation. We think of ego in the context of the word egotistical. Usually when we think of ego, we think of that guy or that person who has a very inflated sense of self. They walk in the room and they're the loudest, most important person, and they don't have time to listen because they're too busy giving off those "I'm the most important person in the world" vibe, and it's very off-putting. And so when we think of ego, it's a very negative thing. But it isn't negative to have an ego. In fact, it's not only is it necessary, but it's inescapable because we all have an ego. From the time when we're little and we began to use the word I, me, that's coming from the place of ego. It's really a self-recognition that we occupy a unique and distinct voice. And that's very important to have that sense of uniqueness and distinctness because it allows us to put in place boundaries and allows us to find individuality. The ego is the development of personal identity that gives us our sense of importance and value. Our self-esteem, our feeling of self-worth, our confidence and ambition are all related to this space of ego. Fostering a healthy sense of ego then becomes important because it's a reflection of the value that we hold in ourselves. To be healthy, we can't think too highly of ourselves. That puts us in the category potentially of a narcissist who is an unsavory personality. It's somebody with an inflated ego. And yet we also can't think too lowly of ourselves so as to devalue our own personhood. You need to have a strong sense of self where the I and the me is important enough to stand up, to have a seat at the table, to have an opinion, to not be taken advantage of. It's a positive thing to say that you come with humility, because humility is an attractive personality. But don't mistake humility for weakness. Humility, in a healthy sense, is the embodiment of valuing the humanity in another. whereas the egotistical person will look at themselves and see themselves more valuable, their opinion more important. Humility, it isn't so weak as to say my opinion isn't important, but it's there saying my ego acknowledges and gives space for your ego to have a voice too. So the I in me respects the I in you. And that allows two people to have a voice at the table. That's what humility in its best form looks like. Humility bows and allows space for other people. Doesn't mean that it's weak and it gets trampled over. There's a quote that I recently came across that is quickly becoming one of my favorite quotes that I think I've ever heard. It's from Nisargadatta Maharaj, and I'm without question butchering that name. Forgive me. But he says that wisdom tells me I am nothing. Love tells me I am everything. And between the two, my life flows. To me, this speaks of a healthy ego. It's a balanced ego. In perspective of life, we are no more valuable than anyone else. So wisdom brings perspective to our humanity and reminds us in the scheme of all things that we're nothing. Wisdom tells me I am nothing. But love tells me I am everything. And that's because in the company of those who care about us, they challenge that viewpoint that we're nothing, and they remind us of our absolute worth. It's their love for us that makes us believe otherwise. They make us feel as though we're everything. So on one hand, with wisdom, we see how small we are. And yet the people around us who love and cherish us, the relationships, the connectedness, they remind us of how important we are. The idea of finding balance is always such an important concept because even in this view, if you spend your entire life looking at yourself as though you're nothing, you'll develop a very unhealthy picture of yourself. Unworthy, incapable, without confidence, without self-esteem. It'll drive you to a place, what I would call a dark place. But on the other hand, if you live your life on the other extreme, where you base your entire sense of self on the opinion of other people, their thoughts about you, their opinion about you, you can fall into a dark place as well. Because you'll derive your entire sense of self-esteem on the opinion of other people. It becomes a very performance approval based existence. And that in itself is not good either. You neither want to be seen as everything in the eyes of everybody, nor nothing in the sense that you're so small in the bigger scheme of things. But that sense of ego needs to find that healthy place of existing in itself. Not too high, not too low. Not too important, and not too insignificant. Not too tied to the opinions of other people, and not so void of value that you see no worth in your own self. You kind of drift between the two. You flow between those two places of recognizing that you're important and you're valuable to the people that you're connected to. But in the big scheme, you are grounded in the reality that you're not so important, that you devalue the humanity in others. That sense of ego is something you fight to find a healthy balance in. But it's important to have an ego, and it's important to see the worth and the value that you bring to the table because it allows you to ask for more when you need more. And it allows you to give and be generous and be kind and gracious to other people. Really, the nothingness and the everythingness makes you more compassionate, more connected, more confident, more gracious, more human. Neither too big, neither too small. Just perfectly worthy and equally human. In self-reflection, ask yourself, what is your state of ego? When you think of I, do you have a strong sense of who you are? Do you feel healthy in how you relate to others? Is there a positive or a negative voice narrating your thought life? So ways that you might assess that state of ego could be, do you feel threatened by somebody with a similar skill set? Can you acknowledge the skills and the talents in other people and learn from them? Or do you find yourself in constant criticism and competition with other people? Can you see yourself objectively? Meaning a realistic, honest view of yourself to recognize both strengths and weaknesses. If you can recognize aspects of yourself in that way, then you'll recognize the need for care, for healing, and for improvement. But you need to see yourself objectively. Do you accept feedback from other people as constructive criticism? How do you receive that feedback? And do you show up authentically? Or do you feel yourself masking, projecting a facade, self-protecting, and or seeking constant approval from other people? Do you have a strong sense of boundaries, an ability to say no or to stand up for yourself in situations that invade your need or your values? Having self-awareness when you're answering these questions will help you to perceive yourself as you really are. That state of ego is something that's hard to be honest with sometimes because we like to see ourselves in the best possible light. At the same time, sometimes we see ourselves in the worst possible light. We have a negative self-view. The goal in all of this, no matter how you answered or assessed yourself based on these questions that I asked, is to develop a positive inner voice to just be willing to look honestly at who you are. Because that honest assessment will allow you to just realize that you can work on things and that you can begin to change the person that you are. Don't be afraid of what you see in yourself. See it as a beautiful, wonderful opportunity. Self-awareness is such a gift. Not everybody has that. Not everybody is willing or ready to go into that place of stark, brutal honesty. And I say brutal because, yeah, sometimes it feels like it. But if you're willing to go there, that's where this healthy mindset begins to take hold. And you might need to do some radical things to work on yourself, but you can do it. I promise you, you can do it. And you'll be all the better for it. I hope this thought is something that you could just reflect on a little bit when you think about how you see yourself. It should bring a sense of humility. And it should just make you come back down or come up, whichever you need to do, but you're always fighting for a healthy sense of ego because that's so vital to your human experience. Thank you for listening. My name is James. You've been listening to Down Tempo.